Hello artists, today is about layers. Let's get started. File open. We're going to be in the courses folder, art, computer graphic lessons, Photoshop lessons, and we're going to be in lesson 4. There's a variety of files in here, so as a reminder, when you're opening up alternating files that kind of skip around in a folder, the control key is the key you want to hold down. So we're going to open up the end, I'm going to hold down control, I'm going to open up the start, I want the beach file, and I want the flower 2 file. So those are the 4 files you want, and click open. So stop the video and do that now. Okay, so let's look at our end file. So this is kind of what we're doing. Ours is gonna look different, but generally speaking, we're gonna be creating a collage out of a bunch of different layers. So as you can see here, lots of layers here. Ours again is going to look different. We're going to skip some of these steps. We're going to add some things in that aren't in here. We're just going to make this our own. So let's go ahead and close the end file. And for your start file, we need to save this in the cloud. So file save as, saving in the cloud, in your lessons folder with your first name, and we're going to call it layers. And we're off and running. So as I said, today is about layers. We need to start by opening up our layers panel if it's not already open. So as a reminder, go to Window, Layers if it's not open. Inside your layers panel, you'll see that there are, for lack of a better word, there's layers. Okay, and right now we can see that there are 2 layers that are visible. There are 3 layers that are not visible. I know this because there's no eye showing up in the visibility column. This is called the visibility column. So if I click on this, that is my visibility column. In order to work with whatever is on a given layer, you have to be on that layer. You have to select that layer from the layers panel. So if I click on these different layers, it makes them the active layer. So I want you to stop the video and I want you to just practice turning on and off the visibility of those layers and practice selecting the different layers. All right. So as I said, that's your visibility column. You've got your stacking order, and then a couple things that I want you to know about is number 1, you can rename layers, and you rename layers by double clicking. So if I double click on where it says postage, I can rename that stamp. So go ahead and try to rename the postage layer and call it the stamp layer. Excellent. You're going to notice a few other things in here. Number 1, you're going to notice you have a background layer. And most of the time, if you create a new document, you're going to have a background layer. And by default, if it's called background, it is going to have this little icon next to it, which means that it is locked. What that means is I can't delete it. I can't alter or subtract from it. In other words, I can't make it transparent if it is locked. The way to unlock it is simply to double click and rename it. So we're going to call it Sky and click OK. You'll notice that that lock icon now is gone. Okay, in your stacking order, I can change the layers up. So I can click and drag and move my Hawaii layer underneath my flower layer. Or I can put my Hawaii underneath my pineapple, so it literally overlaps. Same thing, I can move those things around. So you can kind of see how that stacking order affects what you see. So stop the video and just kind of drag things around. Okay, so if you happen to have dragged the sky layer on top, you'll notice it goes all white. Why? Remember, just because you see white doesn't mean clear in Photoshop. That sky layer is actually filled with a layer of white pixels. If we want to get rid of that, you need to delete it. So let's go ahead and do that. It doesn't have to be at the top of your stacking order, but we're going to start by grabbing our magic wand tool and clicking on the white space. Double check to make sure you are on the sky layer and hit your delete key. So now my sky layer is 100% transparent, and I know that because of the grid that's there. All right, so stop the video and delete the white that is on your sky layer now. Okay, let's redrag our sky layer back down to the bottom. So I'm going to turn all my layers on and I'm going to drag it down to the bottom. To make copies of layers, you simply have to click on that layer and drag it down to the new layer button. So I want you to drag the flower layer down onto the new layer button to make a copy. And notice now I have a new layer. To delete a layer, I can do one of two things. I can right click on it and I can delete the layer, or the easiest way is to drag that down to the trash. All right, so go ahead and delete that flower copy layer. All right, if I want a new blank layer, so I want a clear transparent layer, I want to make a new layer, I can click on the new layer button. If I do, I now have a clear blank layer. So stop the video and try that now. All right, let's go ahead and we're going to delete that layer. We don't need that transparent layer. Stop the video and delete that now. All right, in order to move things around, you have to be on the layer that you want to move around. So first of all, let's reorder our stacking order. So I want it to go in this order. I want it to go sky at the bottom, then pineapple, then flower, then Hawaii, and then stamp. So stop the video and let's reorder them in that order. All right, so to move my flower, we're going to click on the flower layer. If I want to move that, I have to grab the move tool. And you do want to make sure you're on that layer. And in fact, if something is not working, the first thing you should do in the troubleshooting steps for Photoshop is to check your layers panel. Because if something's not working, it's probably not on the right layer. All right, so before we move our flower, we're going to deselect that big background because it's probably still selected. So I'm going to use my keyboard shortcut, Control D, and I'm going to get rid of my selection. Okay, so notice I'm going to move my flower, but I don't have to select my flower because there's nothing else on this layer. If I grab my move tool and I click and drag, notice it moves it around just fine because it's clear. And I know it's clear because there's a checkerboard around it. To double check, we're going to isolate this layer for just a second. In other words, we're going to turn off all the layers at one time. I could manually go and click on each of these eyeballs, but I'm going to show you a quick keyboard shortcut. If I want to see only that layer, if I hold down my Alt key and click on the eyeball next to the flower layer, notice it turns off all the other layers. If I hit Alt again and click on the eye, it brings them all back. So I want you to stop the video and try turning off all the layers except the flower layer by holding down the Alt key. Okay, I want to show you one other thing. So I'm going to move my flowers just up to the corner because this is really important. So if I have my move tool and I'm on the flower layer, if I come down and I click and it's not on the pixels, there's no pixels down here, watch what's going to happen. It grabbed my pineapple, even though I wasn't on the pineapple layer. That's just something you have to be mindful of. If I keep trying to grab something, so let's say I'm on the stamp layer and I keep trying to grab the stamp, but it keeps grabbing that flower, what I can do is I can turn the visibility of the flower layer off and say the pineapple. Now if I click and drag, it does make it easier for that move tool to find what's on that layer. All right? So that's just something you should know about the move tool is even if you're on the layer, if you're not right on where the pixels are on that layer, it might think you're trying to grab a different layer and switch to that different layer. All right? So I want you to stop the video and practice moving around the flowers now. Okay, so we know how to isolate a layer. We know how to select a different layer. We know how to move things around. If I wanted to move two layers at one time, I can actually do that. So we're going to click on the stamp layer. And then we're going to hold on the Control key. And we're going to click on the flower layer. Now with our move tool, notice if I move, it's moving both of them at the same time. I have momentarily linked them together. So stop the video and try that now. Okay, if I want to just move the flowers, what I would simply do is just click on the flower layer. Notice it deactivates the stamp, and I can move that independently. What if I wanted to permanently link some together? So I'm going to move my stamp into the top left-hand corner. I want to link it to the Hawaii layer, so I'm going to hold down my Control key, and I'm going to select Hawaii. Now if I move them, oops, I did just what I said. What happened? I need to be right on that. Notice it moves them both at the same time. So I want you to stop the video and select both the stamp and the Hawaii layer. Now the problem is if I click anywhere else, I move on to something, it's going to unlink those. If I want to make that temporary link a little bit more permanent, I highlight the layers I want to link and I right click and I go to link layers. So I want you to stop the video and I want you to link your stamp and Hawaii layer together now. Excellent. To unlink the layers, you have to simply click on either one of those layers and right click and go to unlink. So practice unlinking those layers.
Aaliyah, Haynes Penny, if you're in the building, your ride is on the S curve. You need to get out there immediately. Thank you.
All right. Well, let's relink those layers. How do we do it? Yep. Hold down our control, right click, and we go to link layers. Now, all of these right click commands I'm doing, they're also in the drop down menu. I'm just making it easier on myself. I'm just right clicking, it makes it simpler. All right, so we've got our stamp and Hawaii layer linked. Excellent. Okay, now we're on to resizing. So we're going to drag another image onto here. So I want you to pull the beach layer down. This is another file. It's a separate file. I want to get this file onto my collage. So I grab my move tool and I'm going to click and I'm going to drag. And notice when I do, I've got the little arrow and I want to drag until I get here and I got a plus sign and you release and it drags and drops it in there. So stop the video and drag that on there. Now, let's talk a little bit about where it showed up in the stacking order. Because before I drug that image on, I was on the stamp layer. The stamp layer was my active. It put the new layer directly on top. If I had been on my pineapple layer and drugged this image on, it would have sandwiched it right here between the pineapple and flower. So it's going to drag it on and set it right above whatever active layer you have. But if you mess that up, it's not a big problem because you just move it, right? All right, so let's double click and rename this layer Beach. This is our beach photo layer. All right, and now we need to resize this thing. Let's make it smaller, and we're actually going to rotate it a little bit. So to do that, we're going to go up to Edit, Free Transform, and you're going to get some bounding boxes here. All you have to do is you have to hold one of the corners or one of the sides, and you can make it bigger or smaller. All right, so stop the video and make it a little bit smaller. All right, to rotate this, we just let the cursor hover outside of the bounding box and we can click and drag. Notice we can spin this whole thing if we wanted to, but we're just gonna go ahead and we're gonna make it a little bit smaller and rotate it and then hit enter. Excellent. All right, now to show you again, remind you, this is why layers are great. I don't have to take the time to select anything because the only thing that's on that layer, and in fact, I'm gonna turn everything off so I can just see my beach layer. The only thing that's on this is my beach. So we're gonna apply a filter to this thing just to show you that I don't have to make a selection. I'm gonna go up to filter and we're gonna open up the filter galleries. We have already had lessons on the filters, so I'm gonna let you pick whatever filter you want, whether it's an artistic filter or one of the sketch filters. I don't really care. I just want you to pick a filter. I'm actually going to apply the glass one, I think, maybe. Nah, that's too much. Oh, there we go. I like the brush stroke, and I'm going to click OK to that. All right. So I didn't have to make any selections because that's all that was on the layer, and I wanted to apply the filter to everything that was on that layer. Now, while we're on this, we're going to apply a stroke. We're going to reset our default colors to black and white, and then we're going to flip that. So that's a quick review. So stop the video if you need to, go back, see how I did that again. So basically, our foreground color is white. We're going to go up to Edit, Stroke. And because I put our foreground color as white, it's going to put a white